The old oak tree stood proudly at the heart of the neighborhood, a silent witness to generations of laughter, tears, and memories. Its gnarled branches reached out like wise arms, offering shade to children playing beneath its canopy and a sanctuary for birds that sang sweet melodies at dawn. This majestic tree was not just a part of the landscape, it was a cherished emblem of the community's history. Planted by my great-grandfather over a century ago, the oak had long been a source of pride, symbolizing endurance and stability. Neighbors gathered for picnics under its sprawling limbs, and every autumn its vibrant foliage painted the streets in hues of orange and gold. For me, it wasn't merely a tree, it was a connection to my roots, a living testament to the legacy my family had built in this town. As I tended to the oak, ensuring it received care through seasons of drought and storms, I felt a deep sense of responsibility for its well-being. Each time I pruned its branches or cleaned up fallen leaves, I was reminded of its resilience, just as my family had weathered life's challenges together. Little did I know that this bond would soon face an unthinkable threat. One fateful day, the Homeowners Association, HOA, convened in their office with an agenda that struck fear into my heart. They deemed my beloved oak tree too old to remain within the neighborhood's aesthetic vision. Their reasoning felt hollow and superficial. How could they dismiss something so integral to our community's identity? The very essence of what made our neighborhood unique lay in its history and character, not in a manicured facade. As I absorbed their decision to cut down the tree, anger surged within me. It felt as though they were severing my ties to family heritage. But what they didn't realize was that I possessed a piece of land just outside our neighborhood boundaries, a plot that included part of the very ground on which their new office now stood. While they assumed they had the upper hand in this battle over aesthetics, I had my own secret weapon tucked away. Instead of pursuing a mundane legal dispute, one they might easily predict, I chose to respond in a way that would deliver a lesson. They had taken something irreplaceable from me. It was time for them to understand what it felt like to lose something significant. Fueled by determination and righteous indignation, I began plotting their downfall in the most poetic manner possible, with the same force they had wielded against my oak tree. The stage was set for an unexpected confrontation, one that would alter the power dynamics in our neighborhood forever. The decision of the Homeowners Association was delivered with an air of unquestionable authority, as though their verdict was carved in stone. During a meticulously organized meeting, the board members sat around their polished conference table, tossing around the phrase aesthetic improvement as if it held the weight of a universal truth. I remember the smug expressions on their faces, believing they were wielding their power for the greater good of our community. Yet, to me, their discussions felt less like deliberation and more like a prelude to a tragic injustice. They argued passionately about how the age of my oak tree conflicted with their vision for modernity, a vision that prioritized uniformity over history. Their rationale, which seemed to stem from an obsession with curb appeal, dismissed the tree's rich narrative of endurance and resilience. They deemed it an eyesore, a relic from a bygone era that did not fit into their sterile blueprint for neighborhood aesthetics. As they spoke in clipped tones, outlining future landscaping plans that would involve ripping out anything they deemed unworthy, I could feel my heart sinking. Despite my attempts to voice my connection to the tree and its integral role in our lives, how it had sheltered generations of children and served as a backdrop for countless family gatherings, they waved me off, uninterested in personal stories overshadowed by bureaucratic banter. Their arrogance shut down any dissent. They were resolute in their mission to sever ties with the past. With each dismissive nod among board members, I realized this was not merely an attack on a tree but an assault on community spirit itself, a calculated move to erase our history in favor of a new, more homogenized vision. After the meeting concluded, I walked away feeling both defeated and furious. It was not just my tree under threat, it was a piece of my family's legacy, a testament to who we were as a community. The thought that these gatekeepers could make such sweeping decisions without understanding or caring about the history they were erasing ignited a fire inside me. In that moment of anger and helplessness, clarity emerged. Rather than allowing them to dictate what our neighborhood should look like, or worse, letting them ruin something so vital, I began plotting my own course of action. The HOA's complacent power structure had underestimated not only the value of my oak tree but also what I might do in retaliation. They believed they could cut down my past without consequence. Little did they know that it would lead to a dramatic confrontation rooted in justice, a poetic reversal that would bring them face to face with the consequences of their hubris. As the anger over the HOA's decision simmered within me, a revelation began to take shape. Just outside the neighborhood boundaries lay a piece of land that I owned, a little-known plot that had belonged to my family for generations. It wasn't particularly grand or impressive at first glance, but it carried with it a sense of history, much like the oak tree they sought to destroy. This land held potential that would soon become my ally in this battle against the HOA. The plot was rugged and wild, overgrown with brush and dotted with native wildflowers that danced in the wind. It had been a place where I spent countless summer days exploring as a child, discovering hidden treasures like odd-shaped stones and vibrant butterflies. While the HOA saw only their vision of what our neighborhood should be, I saw possibilities that could turn the tables on their misguided agenda. In one corner of my land stood an old barn, dilapidated yet charming, a remnant of days gone by when my ancestors used it for farming. The barn had long been abandoned, filled with memories and stories waiting to be resurrected. As I walked through its creaky wooden doors, ideas began to flow like water from a spring. Why not leverage the space to make a statement? The thought excited me. I could use my land not just as a refuge but as an active participant in reclaiming what was taken from me. As news spread about the HOA's decision regarding my oak tree, they hastily built their new office on part of my land, an act of arrogance that fueled my determination further. They thought they had outsmarted me by encroaching on what was rightfully mine without knowing its true ownership or significance. The irony was rich. They were dismantling a pillar of our community while simultaneously squatting on property that belonged to someone who deeply valued heritage. With newfound resolve, I began preparations for retaliation, not just for myself, but for everyone in our neighborhood who understood how important our roots were. I envisioned demolishing their office in a deliberate act designed to mirror their actions against my oak tree. Each step toward this goal became infused with purpose. I wanted them to feel the weight of their decisions and understand the consequences they would face when choosing erasure over preservation. This hidden land became my sanctuary and strategic headquarters, a place where I could enact change without fear of being silenced by bureaucracy. As plans took shape in my mind, I felt empowered by the prospect of not only protecting my legacy but also rallying others around me who shared my vision, one where community history mattered more than hollow aesthetics dictated by an aloof committee. I was ready to turn their own ambitions against them in an unexpected twist that would challenge their authority and perhaps even reshape how we all viewed our shared history moving forward. With the weight of the HOA's decision bearing down on me, a surge of determination ignited within. I couldn't simply sit back and let them dictate the fate of my heritage. It was time to take decisive action. The more I thought about their arrogance, building their office on my land while tearing down my beloved oak, the more I felt a burning need for retribution coursing through my veins. This was not just about a tree, it was about standing up to a power that had grown too comfortable in its authority. As I paced back and forth on my land, envisioning the possibilities, clarity washed over me. The idea of a conventional lawsuit seemed too mundane, too predictable for an organization that thrived on manipulating rules in their favor. They had dismissed my oak tree as nothing more than an old relic, so why not give them a taste of their own medicine? What if I could send a message loud and clear, one that would resonate not just with the HOA but throughout the entire community? The barn on my property became the epicenter of my plans. It was dilapidated but brimming with potential, much like my quest for justice. With each creak of its wooden frame echoing in the stillness of the early morning, I envisioned transforming that space into operational headquarters for my mission. The old barn could serve as a command center where I would gather resources and rally support from neighbors who shared my sentiments. After all, many residents valued the history and character our neighborhood embodied. I began assembling a team of trusted friends and fellow community members who were appalled by the HOA's decision. We met in secret at first, discussing strategies and sharing ideas, fueled by equal parts anger and determination. Each meeting only strengthened my resolve. There was an undeniable energy in our collective frustration that inspired creativity in our plans. Together, we brainstormed ways to dismantle not just their physical presence but also their hold over our community. As we sketched blueprints and plotted logistics, I felt empowered by our shared purpose. This was about reclaiming what belonged to us, our history, our stories, and yes, even our oak tree. Every little detail mattered, from gathering demolition equipment to assessing safety measures. We meticulously planned how to bring down their office with precision. The day approached when we would execute our plan, a day that promised justice served cold against those who thought they could erase our past without consequence. As anticipation swelled within me, I realized this act would become far more than mere retaliation. It would be a declaration of resilience that set the tone for future interactions with those who sought to wield power without accountability. We were ready to reclaim our narrative and remind the HOA that true community cannot be bulldozed away or dismissed as outdated. The day of execution had arrived, and with it came a mix of exhilaration and nerves. We gathered early in the morning when the sun was just beginning to rise over the horizon, casting a soft glow across the property. The air was thick with anticipation and adrenaline as my team assembled at the old barn, now transformed into our base of operations. Each person carried with them a sense of purpose, united by the shared goal of reclaiming our community's narrative. We had equipped ourselves with tools for demolition, everything from sledgehammers to power saws. While it wasn't a typical construction crew, we were fueled by a collective determination that no power tools could replicate. With strategies discussed and plans laid out, we reviewed every detail one last time while keeping our voices low. Secrecy was crucial. The HOA must remain unaware until it was too late. As we approached the office building, I felt my heart pounding in my chest, echoing like a drumbeat of rebellion. The imposing structure loomed before us, a stark reminder of the authority the HOA had exerted over our lives. They had taken something precious from not only me but the entire neighborhood. As I gazed at the foundation that lay on my land, clarity washed over me. Today was not merely about demolishing an office, it was about reclaiming our history and standing up against tyranny disguised as governance. We split into teams, each with defined roles to execute our plan smoothly. Some scouted the surroundings for any unsuspecting HOA members who might disrupt our mission, while others began to dismantle their precious facade one cautious step at a time. As wood splintered and panels fell away under the weight of our efforts, I felt liberation sweep through us, a cathartic release that echoed in every swing of the hammer. The sound of crashing boards and falling debris filled the air, blending with spirited shouts and laughter. It felt surreal, almost like we were part of some grand performance rather than an act of defiance. With each piece that shattered, I envisioned my oak tree standing tall once more, its roots deep in the community where they belonged. We worked tirelessly and efficiently, driven by memories of family gatherings beneath its branches, entrusting us with vision and resolve. As the office collapsed under our efforts, it became clear this wasn't just about revenge. It was a reclamation of lost respect and an assertion of ownership over our shared history. By midday, what remained of the building stood as little more than rubble on the ground, a powerful metaphor for dismantling unjust control. Amidst celebratory cheers filling the air, I couldn't help but feel proud, not just for what we had accomplished individually but collectively as a community standing against an oppressive force. However, amidst our triumph echoed the understanding that consequences loomed on the horizon. I knew the HOA would retaliate with legal action once they caught wind of what we'd done. But that realization didn't dim my joy. Instead, it solidified my resolve to fight back, not just for myself, but for everyone who had ever felt powerless against authority without accountability. This demolition would be remembered as a turning point for all of us in our pursuit of justice. As the dust settled from the demolition and the remnants of the HOA's office lay in ruins, a mixture of triumph and apprehension filled the air. My team and I stood together, exhilarated by our victory yet acutely aware of the storm that was about to follow. The exhilaration of dismantling an unjust authority temporarily overshadowed the uneasy feeling in our chests. We knew the HOA would retaliate with everything they had. In the days following our bold act, whispers spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Some residents expressed their admiration for our daring defiance, seeing it as a rallying cry for community empowerment. Others, however, eyed us with unease, wary of what repercussions might come from angering an organization known for its heavy-handed tactics. Despite this apprehension, conversations began to shift. More neighbors were engaging in discussions about community values and the importance of preserving our heritage. The HOA, unsurprisingly, wasted no time in response. They convened an emergency meeting, their members visibly shaken but determined to regain control. Rumors circulated that they were hiring legal counsel specializing in aggressive litigation, a move intended to intimidate anyone thinking of standing against them. But while they plotted their next steps behind closed doors, I found solace in the support my actions had generated within the community. Soon enough, the anticipated legal notice arrived at my doorstep. The HOA had formally sued me for damages and trespass, demanding retribution for what they viewed as an outrageous act of defiance. Instead of cowering under their threats, I saw this lawsuit as another opportunity to expose their arrogance and hypocrisy. It became clear that we were not just fighting for my oak tree or my land, we were defending a deeper legacy shared by everyone who had lived here. As preparations began for the upcoming court case, I spent hours compiling evidence, not just regarding their encroachment on my land but also digging into their operations and questionable practices throughout the years. Conversations with other residents revealed stories of mishandled funds and secretive decisions that hurt various homeowners. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that we were up against individuals who had operated without accountability for far too long. On the day of the trial, feelings of nervous anticipation gripped me as I walked into the courtroom filled with supporters from our neighborhood. Their presence reminded me why we fought. This was about standing up for our rights and reclaiming dignity in a community where those in power assumed they could silence dissent without consequence. As both sides presented their cases, it became evident that this would not merely be a legal battle, it was a moral stand against tyranny cloaked in governance. With every piece of evidence presented and each testimony shared, I felt emboldened by truth. Ours would be a victory not just for myself but for every resident who believed in protecting what was rightfully ours. In those tense hours spent in court, I realized how this confrontation could redefine not only my future but also reshape an entire community's views on authority. Little did the HOA know that this trial would reveal not only their crimes but also ignite a much-needed change, a reckoning that held them accountable for their actions and ultimately brought justice back into our neighborhood once again. The courtroom was filled with an air of tension as the lawsuit filed by the HOA against me unfolded. As I took my place at the plaintiff's table, an array of emotions coursed through me: defiance, anxiety, and triumph all mingled into one. I was prepared to face the organization that had tried to erase a fundamental part of my heritage while simultaneously attempting to silence my voice. Today would not merely be about defending myself, it was an opportunity to shine a spotlight on the HOA's long-standing practices and injustices that, for too long, had escaped public scrutiny. The proceedings began with the HOA's attorney launching into a fervent argument. They painted me as a reckless vandal stripped of respect for community values and property rights. Their narrative aimed to position themselves as innocent guardians striving for order against a rogue individual determined to disrupt peace. But underneath their polished arguments lay a deeper truth that I was eager to reveal: the layers of manipulation and corruption buried within their governance. In contrast, my team and I had gathered an extensive collection of evidence that contradicted their claims. Witnesses were lined up to testify not just about the demolition but about misallocation of funds and broken promises made by the HOA regarding the community's well-being. Our documents included photographs showing discrepancies in what was promised versus what was delivered, barren landscaping, and eroded trust. I could see cracks beginning to form in the HOA's defense as our side presented one compelling piece after another. Cross-examination proved powerful, especially when we showcased testimonials from other residents who had been harmed by the HOA's mismanagement. Every story shared in that courtroom chipped away at their carefully crafted facade, revealing them for what they truly were: an entity interested in control over actual community welfare. It became clear that this case stretched far beyond myself. It was ultimately about empowering neighbors who felt oppressed and ignored. As I listened intently, some residents began speaking out in court regarding their grievances with the HOA. Each new testimony resonated with courage. It encouraged others in attendance to share their quiet struggles against an authority they had learned to fear over many years. The atmosphere shifted palpably as stories intertwined. Their anecdotes became intertwined with mine until they formed something bigger than any single event. It was a shared truth that could not be ignored. In those moments of courage, faces turned towards me, not with judgment or pity but rather with solidarity and understanding, a community affirming its strength together. As closing statements approached, I felt fortified not by anger or vengeance but rather by a sense of purpose bursting within me. No longer merely seeking personal vindication, I envisioned this trial as a pivotal moment that could reshape our neighborhood's future for everyone involved, an opportunity to foster accountability at every level. When it finally came down to deliberation, I kept faith that we would win this fight, not just for justice concerning my oak tree but also for everyone who believed we deserved better governance grounded in trust rather than secrecy. We were fighting against dismissive authority and reclaiming democracy where it belonged, in our community's hands. As the trial progressed, the moments of tension transformed into revelations that echoed through the courtroom, exposing the very fabric of corruption that had long hidden beneath the HOA's polished veneer. The air hung heavy with anticipation as my attorney called forth witnesses, other homeowners who bravely stepped forward to share their stories. Each testified to the HOA's mismanagement, illustrating how the organization wielded its power like a blunt instrument, leaving scars on our community. One witness, an elderly woman named Mrs. Thompson, recounted her struggles to get basic repairs done to her home after the HOA promised funds for community upkeep but instead redirected those resources towards lavish office expansions. With each narrative shared, the courtroom seemed to transform. It became not just a space for legal proceedings but a platform for unity against adversity. People began to see the HOA as not merely an organization governing our lives but a bureaucracy that could easily become tyrannical when left unchecked. As we delved deeper into the testimonies, I noticed cracks in the HOA's defense strategy. My attorney introduced compelling evidence, including financial records that showcased discrepancies in expenditures. The audience leaned in closer as numbers were presented, items listed as renovations for community assets that had never materialized. As murmurs rippled through the crowd, I caught glances of disbelief from some attending members of the HOA. Their expressions hinted at unease among those who had long taken power for granted. The pivotal moment came when we unveiled meticulously documented instances of neglect and dishonesty during cross-examination. Surrounded by papers filled with discrepancies and unaccounted funds, my lawyer pushed back against their half-hearted denials. A sense of urgency hung in the air as we challenged their credibility. Their facade of innocence rapidly disintegrated as truths spilled out in horrifying clarity. During this testimony on financial impropriety, I witnessed a palpable shift. Tension transformed into palpable outrage within the audience. Those present began to comprehend how high the stakes truly were. Not only was this trial about my oak tree or a handful of injuries inflicted upon individuals. It was about reclaiming our collective dignity and safeguarding our community's well-being from an organization failing to fulfill its responsibilities. Unexpectedly, my testimony aligned seamlessly with that of other residents, transforming a series of isolated grievances into a powerful indictment against the HOA's systemic failings, a network woven from fear and intimidation rather than accountability and transparency. As I spoke, I felt emboldened by their stories resonating within me. What prompted me to act now acted as fuel for everyone involved. As deliberation approached, I observed members of the community leaning toward one another, whispering in solidarity about the necessary level of accountability we demanded, not just for myself but for generations to come. This was not simply about winning a lawsuit, it was about igniting an awakening within our neighborhood and reminding ourselves that together we could cultivate real change. In those nail-biting hours leading to a verdict, I understood how this would forever alter our collective narrative and restore faith, trust in ourselves and in each other renewed. A promise kept not just through individual courage but forged together in undeniable truth. The day of the verdict arrived, a moment laden with anticipation. As I entered the courthouse, the weight of hope and anxiety settled upon my shoulders. Community members filled the benches, their presence a testament to the solidarity we had forged throughout this tumultuous journey. Today, we were not just spectators, we were participants in a defining moment that stood to reshape our neighborhood's destiny. When the judge finally returned to the courtroom, I felt my heart race. With an air of gravitas, he began reading aloud, his voice echoing off the walls as he recounted the facts of our case. The room fell silent, each face turned towards him in rapt attention. As he summarized our arguments about the HOA's mismanagement and abuse of power, I felt a swell of pride wash over me. Our voices had been heard, we had fought back against injustice. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for, the ruling. The judge declared that not only was my action taken in self-defense against unjust authority valid, but also that the HOA had indeed engaged in corrupt practices worthy of accountability. As his words sank in, a collective gasp filled the room, followed by a ripple of cheers and applause from my supporters. It was an affirmation that spoke volumes. Justice was not only possible but tangible. In addition to ruling in my favor regarding damages from their initial lawsuit, the judge ordered an independent investigation into the HOA's financial practices and directed it to be held accountable for its actions. This decision sent shockwaves through the community. No longer would they operate under layers of secrecy without fear of repercussion. Sobering thoughts filtered through my elation as I realized what this verdict meant. It wasn't just a personal victory, it was a clarion call for transparency and accountability that could reverberate across neighborhoods beyond our own. It laid groundwork for other communities grappling with similar oppressive governance structures to rise up together against wrongdoing. However, as excitement surged throughout the room, there was an underlying understanding that this victory wouldn't erase all challenges moving forward. The HOA would likely seek appeals or retaliatory measures. Their arrogance would not go quietly into defeat. Yet today marked a pivotal shift, not merely for myself but for all residents who had been silenced too long. As congratulatory remarks poured in from neighbors and friends alike, I saw reflections of gratitude and hope mirrored in their eyes, the belief that change was now attainable if we stood united. While we still faced future uncertainties from an embattled HOA eager to retain control over what they deemed theirs, this newfound confidence infused us with resolve. Together we vowed to remain vigilant, ensuring every resident knew their voice mattered and that collective action could usher in genuine reform within our community governance structures. We were no longer simply dictated by rules imposed from above, we were empowered participants shaping our narrative moving forward. In those celebratory moments after hearing the verdict, I understood that while battles lay ahead, we had already won something far more significant than any single case. We reclaimed our belief in justice and reaffirmed our commitment to preserving a shared legacy where community values reign supreme over tyranny masquerading as authority. Reflecting on the journey we undertook, it's clear that the battle against the HOA was about so much more than just one oak tree or a single office building. What began as a deeply personal struggle evolved into a powerful movement for community empowerment and justice. In reclaiming my land and dismantling an authority that sought to erase our history, I not only honored my family's legacy but also ignited a flame of resilience within my neighbors. By standing up against the HOA, we faced not only their oppressive tactics but also challenged the very notion of who held power in our community. The triumphant verdict signaled a shift, a signal that those who wield power irresponsibly can be held accountable. It established a precedent for transparency, demonstrating that no organization could obscure its actions without facing scrutiny and consequences. This realization was profoundly liberating. We were no longer just subjects of governance but active participants with voices worth amplifying. The experiences shared during the trial reaffirmed the truth. Change begins when individuals come together to demand it. Each testimony contributed to a tapestry woven from countless struggles, highlighting the fact that many voices, united in purpose, could challenge even the most entrenched systems of authority. It strengthened those who had lived under the weight of silence and fear, reminding them that their stories mattered and together they could forge meaningful change. While challenges undoubtedly still lay ahead, retaliatory actions from the HOA and potential appeals of the ruling looming over us, this victory redefined our resolve. We knew that standing united would prepare us to face conflicting forces with unwavering determination. Conversations bloomed among residents, discussions shifted from compliance to collaboration, igniting a spark of collective responsibility that spread through our neighborhood. This experience also provided me with newfound perspectives, understanding that true leadership means fostering an environment where everyone feels empowered to share their ideas and concerns. As I stepped away from navigating this legal battle, I recognized the importance of ensuring that others are included in shaping our community's future voice. Together we nurture an environment free from fear. A community where inclusion breeds strength and transparency fosters trust. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but what resonated within me post-trial was optimism, not just for myself but for every resident ready to reclaim their narrative. We were stirring revolutionary changes by acknowledging shared experiences rather than hiding behind walls built out of fear or complacency. In reflecting on this journey one last time, I understood that our battle wasn't merely against one tyrannical authority, rather it was emblematic of broader societal struggles against injustice everywhere. Standing tall amidst uncertainty reinforced my conviction: communal strength can reshape reality where love for home remains paramount while reinforcing accountability rests upon ensuring no voice is left unheard. And thus, as we ventured forward together united through trial and triumph alike, the roots we planted in the soil would grow into an enduring legacy rooted firmly in values triumphed where community spirit outlasts oppression every time.